if we haven't got the diversity of thought and beliefs within a collaboration to cause a bit of conflict, then maybe we've got too much homogeneity and we need to be thinking about who we're collaborating with. But that's kind of jumping the gun in terms of the one of the punchlines. A little bit about myself. I'm married to Lynn, who's on the left there, and I've got two teenage daughters. One's 17 and one's 14, Kobe and Briley. Just finished NCAs today, chilling out. For myself, I've had a portfolio career. I've been an academic for about 12 years. I was a secondary teacher in Māngere for 6, a school counsellor, and I've worked in drug rehab and here and overseas. And then the last 10 years I've been working in consulting, part of Leadership Lab. And that's quite relevant today because our particular niche is what we say, fostering collective responses to complex issues. And so I'm going to be talking a bit about that, complex issues, a bit about collective responses, and then in the second half talking a bit more detailed about the tantrums and the kind of behaviours that we have to be able to work through when we're doing this kind of hard mahi. So what have we got here? So should we start with the collaboration piece? All right, and I'm just going to talk you through kind of my thought process with this. So when you think about why people want to collaborate, all right, in fact, I'll get you to do this. Think of a collaborative project you're aware of and what is their why. So you might be thinking of a whakaaro, you might be thinking of a project within your own kura where, you know, that two different teachers are collaborating, or maybe it's a co-teaching situation. So just draw that to mind. What's the why for that collaboration? Now, in my mind, I've come across two sort of quite common reasons, which are not great reasons to collaborate. One is I work a lot with government agencies in our work in Leadership Lab, and the number of times I've heard the really honest answer, which is we've been told to collaborate, right? Because it's very much a bit of a mandate, I guess. And like I know the State Services Commission, you know, overseeing all the agencies, pretty much has put that out quite a few years ago in terms of the Productivity Commission. I think that's over here. Better public service leadership, break down the silos, let's work together. Now, I agree with that, but when people turn up and say, we've been told to collaborate, this, okay, let's try and lift it up a little bit from there. Another not so flash reason that I have used myself is that it's trendy or exciting. And what I've learned is that collaboration is, yeah, it can be a bit trendy, but it's definitely not exciting. It's, if you can do the project without having to collaborate, I would suggest that, because collaboration is tricky and hard, and only use collaboration when you need to. Don't do it for fun. Right, now that sounds a bit negative, but it's just the gnarliness of it means that it's a particular process that's used for a particular why. And here's, in fact, to the point, I think we sometimes think collaboration is the goal here, like we're all trying to collaborate, when I've realized that collaboration is never the goal. The goal is some sort of impact. Collaboration might be the means to the goal, which is great, but it's not the actual goal, right? We don't get to the thing and sit around the table and say, hey, we're all collaborating, we've arrived. No, we haven't had any impact yet. So the two whys for me, I better watch the time, Carolyn. I'll just pop them up. One is quite low level, but important, and that's efficiency. You know, if you and I can work together, we could save things. You know, we could save the overlaps or the gaps, or we could get better prices, or we could, you know, have better use of people or resources or economies of scale, which is great. But the other one is this here. All right. So impact, solutions that are fit for purpose to address complex issues. And when I say complex issues, it's a bit of a trendy word, but there's other words too, like gnarly issues or wicked problems, some people say, which is a bit too negative, or intractable problems. These are like social issues that we've tried to do something about, and we almost feel like we're making no progress. So in my mind, we save collaboration for those issues. If we're not dealing with a complex issue like that, we use some other process. But when we realize that we're dealing with a complex social issue, that's the invitation into the collaborative space. Let's talk a bit more about that. Oh, and not able to be solved individually, yeah. So a couple of things that I've found really useful. This is the Productivity Commission I was talking about earlier, but just have a quick read of that. I think a theory of mine for me is to think about all the potential what we need is already present in the system, including the leaders. It's just that we have to find a way to connect them, to connect that potential in the system. And even better, there's a guy called Brad Jackson who's at Victoria Uni. And in fact, this paper he wrote quite a while ago is the reason why we became Leadership Lab, because you can see it there in red. But his quote that really, really challenged us and kind of inspired us is this one here. So I'll just let you have a quick read. In fact, I might just read it out. In a country of 5 million people, we have the potential to cross divides, to bring together very disparate organisations from different sectors, iwi, community, public, private, not-for-profit, and actually cross those divides. That, to me, is an act of leadership. Those who are willing to get outside their comfort zones to be able to inhabit others people's worlds and find areas of common purpose. And when he talks about this, I've seen him, sit with us and talk about this. He actually stands up and reaches across the table and he shakes someone's hand. And he says, what we're trying to do is do that reach, right? Across a big gap to someone else, and someone else who's not like me and possibly I don't even like, right? So this is the really important thing here. We're not looking for colleagues to collaborate with, like-minded people. That's collegiality. What we're looking for is people that have a common issue and are prepared to put aside their differences to be able to collaborate around that issue. And in Leadership Lab, we have a sort of shortcut for that. And it is here. So what we find is that this sentence applies to everything we do. Determined collaboration around a compelling purpose ignites possibilities. And the most important part of that is the word ignites. Right. So what gives energy to this collaboration, this kahuiako, this co-teaching arrangement, this impact project we're doing in the community? What gives energy to it? And this is what, if I just share this here, this whakaaro cup, I've actually got a combi mug here, so I'll use that instead. It's not a literal cup in collaboration, but the way collaboration is ignited is when someone names an aggravating issue and kind of metaphorically puts it on the table and says, I've had a guts full of that. I've had enough of that. Right? I'm appalled by that. We've got to change this. So the very first step is someone names a grievance, I suppose, or an aggravating issue. And the second step is that someone else goes, yes, me too. So it's basically what's the issue? And then the second step is who cares? Who else cares about that? Now, I'm going to come back to that after the breakout because we've kind of designed a bit of a process around that. But the question that's probably the most important question at the beginning is what compelling issue would aggravate you enough and ignite you enough into coming together with others to solve it, right? So this is not who do I want to do some stuff with because I like them and they speak the same language as me and have the same values as me, but what is the issue that I'm concerned about? And I'm going to give you some examples because this builds into all sorts of different collaborations. I remember sharing this question at the Positive Ed New Zealand conference a couple of years ago at Christ College. Some of you might have been there. And we did one of those online things and people typed the answer to that into their phones. And this is what they came up with on the big screen. All right. So what was the question? What would aggravate you and ignite you into coming together with others to find the time, to find the motivation and energy to do it? And if you ever look there's some pretty powerful list of hard stuff, right? And there's a few trivial ones as well, like bad coffee and things like that. But there's some real big items in there. The yellow one in the middle, just below, and the inequity one is probably the biggest driver for me in terms of the work I do. And I do come together with lots of people to try and address that. But there's plenty of others there. Let's go for like maybe let's go like a less global one. And I'm just going to share this story. This is a post-earthquake story. This is like a story from my backyard. This is like 200 meters from my home. And this is an unlikely collaboration. Basically, the short version is that the local pub fell down in the earthquake. The publican, we all came down and watched, and there's sort of like all the bulldozers coming in and knocking down our pub. And the important thing about this is the pub is the symbol of our community. We used to go down there and to have dinner with our friends and family. And it's like an English pub, I suppose, in terms of a watering hole. So that was gone. And 100 metres down the road, there was an Anglican church, and you can see that in the bottom right. And the vicar is the lady in red at the bottom. And to cut a long story short, Dean, who was the publican, had a chat with Mary, the vicar, and said, do you think we could team up and create this sort of village watering hole? Mary loved that idea. She applied for a liquor license at the church and got declined, of course. And so the two of them decided to just flout the law and do it anyway. And so they set up the BYO pub, which appeared like 2 weeks after the earthquake in my street, right? That lasted for about a year, and twice a week, the locals would all gather there and have pizza, some wine, and kids would be running around. But we basically fixed our community through that watering hole place, right? So the cup for that was, we really need a place for locals to gather, to be able to support each other and be able to rebuild. What have I got? Got a few more here, and then I'm going to give you a chance in breakouts to have a think about what yours might be. We all know about the Student Volunteer Army, probably in Christchurch, and how they all activated, which was great. One thing you probably don't know is that they, after the earthquakes had kind of settled down, they carried on. They're still going today, the Student Volunteer Army, and they partnered up with the police and a local church and gap filler, and worked in the local Riccarton community, which seems like a reasonably affluent community, but when you dig below the surface, it's had the highest crime rate in Christchurch, and it had the lowest sense of belonging. So what was the question here they're trying to solve? How do we rebuild belonging and reduce the crime rate? That was the cup. This is a non-educational example, but it's really inspired me. And, you know, in Christchurch, we lost all our roads and most of our roads and water and loos and all that. These 5 white boxes are big, huge, competitive, aggressive construction companies. They decided to collaborate, and they called themselves Strengthening a Stronger Christchurch Infrastructure Rebuild Team. They went for 5 years and rebuilt the entire horizontal infrastructure in Christchurch. That's why we can move around now and still live where we do. That was not easy for them, because globally and nationally they compete. They cut each other's throats, but they had to work out a way to collaborate here in Christchurch, right? And so their cup was, how do we get the city back on its feet? How do we get our city back on its feet? A couple more examples, then we'll go to a break. Those of you from Christchurch, when you know our schools very damaged, more than 150 with major damage, and you know we're 10 years into a rebuild program now. So Grow Waitaha, which is, you may be aware of if you're from down here, has come together, and it's involved all these parties. So Te Runanga o Ngaitahu, MOE, CORE, Massey, ourselves, Evaluation Associates, plus the Principals Associations, plus the sector and all the teachers. We decided, not like immediately overnight, but we decided to have a one program approach to this with one vision. All right. And the question we put at the center of that was the one here. All right. How do we build collaboration between all our schools to help us renew our learning programs, be future focused? All right. And that's, rest is history, really. So firstly, what compelling issue would aggravate and ignite you into coming together with others to solve it? And I just need to explain the reason why it's a negative question, like it's aggravation's a negative emotion, right? Is because what we found is that there's a lot more energy in someone saying, I'm aggravated by this, I'm appalled by it, and it has to stop, as opposed to someone going, you know what? Why don't we think of a whole new way of working with our students? Right, that comes later, like the opportunity piece comes later, but generally what happens is our values get trampled on or offended, and therefore we have an emotional response to that, and we go, okay, I've had a guts fall now, I'm going to do something about it. So interestingly, it often starts as a negative emotion of like, you know, let's stop the bad thing, right? It turns into let's make the good thing, but that's a bit later. So second question is, okay, think of an issue, and second question is, who else cares about that? What other, you could say stakeholders, but what other people could have an interest in that. And don't just think about your mates, think about who else has a perspective on this issue and might also care about it. Okay, so let's dig down a bit deeper into the dynamics within collaboration. I think I spend most of my working life in collaboration now, and it's I love it. I must be a sucker for punishment because it's not the easiest way to work. But let's just go back to, we talked about the cup before, so we've started talking about well, I'm suggesting that the entry point of collaboration is what's the compelling issue. If we can't identify that, it's probably not a collaborative setting. And this is just a little flow chart, and I'll show you two different ways of kind of what we've seen. It's not like a formula, but it's more retrospectively, we've noticed that the same kind of flow happens across all sorts of collaboration. So the first one is the cup. So someone names usually a threat, but sometimes an opportunity. And then there's kind of like a who else cares bit, and that repeats quite a few times. So especially if you're dreaming up something that's not like a existing project, but it's just a really annoying issue or a aggravating issue that you want to sort out. You might spend weeks or months in those two stages just talking about the issue and getting other people involved. Some of our big multi-year projects, which are now funded and in Leadership Lab, weren't funded for the first 12 months because it was just a conversation that was growing in terms of, I guess, we call it a guiding coalition or a movement of people that was concerned about an issue. Which is quite empowering because you don't have to wait to be given the opportunity. You can actually make the opportunity. If you can get enough people kind of around the table, so to speak, then you can start dreaming up ideas. And that's nice because it changes. And there's kind of a role for a collaborative leader here. The conversation changes from kind of a negative conversation, which is the initial one, to oh, wouldn't it be great if, like, someone will just pop an idea that, wouldn't it be amazing if we could kind of get all our ducks in a row? Imagine if we could, get that or whatever. And so little ideas start popping. And so I guess that's co-design or ideation or brainstorming, but it's just collecting all sorts of ideas. And what happens is optimism starts lifting because it's a bit of an antidote to the moan bonding, which is happening at the beginning, right? And then from there, it's pretty simple. It's like, okay, well, let's pick one or two of those ideas. Let's try them, and then let's refine them really, really quickly. So it's kind of like a loop there. Try ideas and refine them. And if I show you a better version of that, we've written this resource, which is on our website, and I'll link it to you, but we call it Showing Up Differently, that approach of collaboration. And it looks like this. All right, so it's the same thing, just drawn a bit nicer. Identify an issue, and in this case, it's about community providers and funders coming together around like a collective impact in a community. So someone names the issue, that's the cup, then engages the who else cares phase, co-designs the ideating, then you define as you pick, out of those 25 ideas, let's try a couple. So you define and implement. So you might need to get a better resource. And often what happens is because you've done a good job of getting people around the table, you end up with people with different hats on professionally, but they're there because of the cup. And often you'll get like someone with some resource there, either humans or money or both. And they might say, I really care about that issue. I'm happy to put some money towards that. And someone else might say, I care about that issue. I'm happy to put some time in, whatever. And so you're kind of crowdsourcing the resource you need for the project. Let's implement. And then when we say evaluation there, we're really talking like rapid formative evaluation, not summative. We're not talking about how did that project go. We're basically going, how did that thing go yesterday? How, and like every week, just looping it really, really quick. So that square circle, square loop in the middle is like a little rotor, and that spins like thousands of times. And what pops out at the bottom is some of the impacts that we're looking for. And the lovely thing for me about this is that at the beginning, you identify the issue, but you've got no idea what the answer is. That's why it's still an issue, right? Otherwise, someone would have solved it already. But if you do this really well, you get all these quite innovative solutions that do have impact on the issue, which is great because then your optimism lifts even more. Now, that's all very well, but then you've got the human factor. Now, let's have a wee look at this. There's a colleague, if you want to go on the website, you'll see kind of blow by blow how to sort of design a project like that. And it's kind of like an interactive thing you can see there. But let's talk about what the not so good side. All right. Now, a colleague of ours, Cheryl Doy, she's part of our team. She showed me this a few years ago. It's called Triz. Triz apparently is, I think, Russian for destruction, apparently. But it's basically a little activity you can do. And it's a really nice way to unpack the stuff that can undermine collaboration. All right. So if you see the questions there, imagine doing this with your staff. So instead of asking them, how can we collaborate and improve what we're doing, you ask them, how can we collaborate in ways that, let me just move that waste time and don't meet the future needs of the group we're serving? And how can we reliably get the worst result imaginable? Now, people look at you like you're crazy when you ask that. And then you say, no, look, just hypothetically, have a go. Like, what have you seen in collaboration? What could possibly go wrong? How could you, if you were of the mind to try and take this thing down, how would you do that? And they look at you like, you sure you want us to answer that? And you're like, okay. And then you have quite a few funny laughs and ridiculous ideas like this. So have a wee look. So this is I'm describing a process. This is the first step. How have you seen people destroy collaboration? Or what would you do if you wanted to do that? So you can see a bunch of things there. Ego is bigger than the group, rigid processes, tell them how it's going to be, have no strategy, spread rumors about other people's incompetence, take all the glory, don't turn up, put everyone else's ideas down, tip off the serious fraud office, all these kind of things, right? Now, of course, you're just kind of hypothetical at this stage, right? But people write these post-its based on what they've seen, and we've probably seen most of those things happen at some point, right? And then the second step is you go, okay, why don't we just turn that on us just for now, not in a kind of scary way, but is there anything on that list that resembles in any shape or form what we do now? Let's be brutally honest and maybe even provocative. Let's go there. What are the elephants in the room, right? And it's kind of a way to allow a bit of vulnerability and unpacking some of the hard stuff, right? Because people tend to be pretty PC and they sit there in silence and you just don't know why things aren't good, but you do know the energy is dropping. And then the third step in that process is you have a think about how you can mitigate that. Okay, how am I or how could we stop or achieve the best possible outcome? And let's real concrete. How could we do that? I was coaching a guy earlier today from Oranga Tamariki, and he's using this with his team. And we were calling it like a pre-mortem. Just imagine that the project you're running is going to die at some point, and what would be the cause of death? All right. Now, it sounds like a terrible thing to say, but it's a way of preempting that by saying, let's think that through and unpack that a little bit. Now, I want to finish this section with some of the things I've found in terms of the human dynamics that can happen. Now, if I just go to the next stage, or here's some of the positive strategies that come out of it. So that's finishing that activity, right? Okay, here's some of the, I guess, my own learned experience. One is this one, that number one, culture is strategy for lunch. So in the collaboration, I'm always paying attention to culture. I'm more interested in the culture and process than I am in the actual ideas we're coming up with, because the process will reproduce great ideas eventually. So I pay attention to that. The second one is, well, Stephen, this time last year, Stephen and I did a Leaders Connect, and you can look it up if you want, but it was called Out with the Hero and In with the Collective. And the punchline of that was, think about empowering collective leadership, like as in everyone can be a leader, rather than I'm the boss here and I'm running this. Right, now, if you were interested in that, there's a whole video on that. And this is my last slide. Right, in Leadership Lab, we often call the role of leading collaboration a ninja, which again is a little sort of to say, but Karate Kid, all that kind of thing. Ninjas are amazing at doing like moves that can either be in self-defense or they can kind of use the power of the opposition, right? Become like water, Bruce Lee said. And I really like the idea that to lead, all collaborations need someone who's got ninja-like skills to be able to handle all those dynamics that are going on. I think of you that are in kahuiako, you know what I mean. There's no clear playbook for that, there's so many dynamics that can go on, and you really need someone in there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the lead principal. It just can be someone in there who's really got ninja-like powers. And here's some of the powers. So the first one is that mantra we said earlier. Think about the ignition, right? And keep naming it. What's the cup? What are we here for? Right? What's the thing that binds us together? We're not necessarily here for the relationships. The lovely thing about that for me is I'm in collaborations with people that I like now, but I didn't like at the beginning, right? Because I didn't come together because I liked them. I came together because I needed them, because most of these complex issues are caused by fragmented systems. So then by definition, we must bring together those fragmented parts to solve them, right? But that does mean we can have differences of opinions, or, be competitive with people, or, or maybe we've got a grudge against them or something. And then linked to that, relationships are the currency. So I'm saying that you don't have to have the relationships right before you start, but you need to weave those threads of relationship. And I've found that that's the one-on-one manaki is what works there. So if I'm trying to be a ninja of collaboration, I'm doing lots and lots of one-on-ones outside the project meeting times. And especially when someone has a tantrum, that's when the one-on-ones really kick in, because I'm relying on the relational bridge I've got with them to be able to actually bring them back, right? Or even listen to what their concern is. Third one, whānanga shared values and ways of working, a living agreement. So the idea that not only are we talking about the cup often, the reason we're here, but also we're talking about how do we want to be together, and what's sort of above the line and what's below the line, and how do we keep that alive, and how are we going on that at the moment, right? So it's our, I guess our tikanga, but it's done through whānanga, as in this is a constant conversation, probably like on the agenda kind of thing, Fourth one, this kind of is kind of like the restorative practice way of working, but not applying it to students, it's applying it to our colleagues. So if we're going to be in a collaboration, always think with, not to, not for, not them and us, it's us, right? So getting alongside people and having that approach of we are partners in this. We're not kind of managers in this, or direct reports in this, or anything like that. A couple more. This one that's really hard for me because of my strengths. One of my strengths is I ideate a lot. So I often come up with solutions. And what I've learned is that it's best if I don't put them out there too soon, because co-design or co-creation or co-construction enables innovation, because more people talk, but also more ownership. So I'm very careful never to start with a solution, or even if I dream one up overnight, if I am going to share that with the group, I'll put a rider on it saying, hey, look, here's an idea, feel free to critique it, right? Second to last one, networks of shared leadership rather than individual. And the main thing there is share the ownership. When you're collaborating with parties that are from different silos, different parts of the school, or different schools, or different agencies, or whatever, it's really, 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 really important that no one feels like they own this thing individually. It has to be shared ownership. This is a we all have rights to this. We all share this, right? Because that builds the buy-in from above. And I think the last one, create safe spaces for honest kōrero, model appropriate vulnerability. And I've been in probably 2 or 3 of those in the last 10 days where I've been asked to come in and help create that safe space for collaborative groups where they're very broken. And it's that role of being able to, I guess it's mediation, but maybe not the legal end of that. It's more just creating a safe space for people to be able to put out how they're feeling, what their concerns are, and be able to hear each other. So there is a vulnerability to that. And it's quite beautiful if it's done well. I've seen, grown men and women with tears in their eyes, being able to talk about things that have offended them 5 years ago, and they haven't had a chance to talk about that. And if that's done well, it doesn't escalate. It actually builds those bridges.